The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. That's the beginning of Henry David Thoreau's book, Walden, A Life in the Woods. Before I give my excerpts, before I recite my excerpts, I'd like to give a little bit of background about myself and Thoreau's, my relationship with the book, and how Henry David Thoreau came to write it. I first read Walden in high school. Now, it was not for any type of cerebral leaning on my side. It was required reading in one of my classes. I don't know how many of you have read Walden, but it's not the easiest book to read. The language of the era, and Thoreau has a tendency to be speaking about a subject such as the pond, and all of a sudden he's reciting ancient Greek philosophy, and you're wondering how does that work into the pond. So it takes some reading. So I had to read it in high school, and I didn't really understand it. College came, I read it again. A little bit more understanding about it. When I found out that I was going to be giving a speech today on the subject of Henry Thoreau, I took the opportunity to read it again. Now, I don't know if it's because I've read it 3 or 4 times, or, to be honest, with my age, I've become more cerebral, maybe. But I'm understanding it better than I did back in high school. Now, Thoreau himself was born, as I mentioned, in Concord, Massachusetts. He was a very learned man. He went to Harvard, but he wasn't overly successful in his life. He had various jobs he did. He tried teaching, but at that time they were very much into corporal punishment, and he didn't agree with that, so he stopped teaching. His father was a pencil manufacturer, so he thought he'd go into business with his father, but pardon the pun, he didn't see any point in that. But one thing he did do throughout his life is that he kept journals. He loved to keep journals about everyday life, his observations and such. He became great friends with Ralph Waldo Emerson, a transcendentalist. And Emerson was like a mentor to him and suggested that, he try living a life of simplicity and find his own spiritual awakening. That prompted him to go and build his cabin at Walden Pond. Let me read an excerpt from why he chose this. We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture, or to carve a statue, or so to make a few objects beautiful. But it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do. To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts. Each man is tasked with to make his life, even in its details, worthy of the contemplation of his most elevated and critical hour. And then I shall repeat. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn what I had to teach, and not, when I came to die, to discover I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation, unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put a rout to all that was not life. To cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms, and if it proved to be mean, why then get to the whole and genuine meanness of it, to publish its meanness to the world? Or if it were sublime, to know it by experience, to be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. Now, when I first started reading Thoreau, I pictured him living in the woods, away from everyone, hermit life, maybe talking to squirrels. Come to find out, his cabin at Walden Pond was a mere 2 miles from town. He was not way out in the woods. He didn't cut himself off from humanity. He went to town often. He had many visitors to his cabin. He had people coming and going quite often. He might have still talked to squirrels, but that was a personal thing that we won't get into. That was one of my most surprising discoveries of Thoreau, was that he wasn't cut off from people. He liked people. He felt himself part of humanity. But this was where he wanted to learn more about himself. That's why he went to Walden. I think that I love society as much as most, and I'm ready enough to fasten myself like a bloodsucker for the time to any full-blooded man that comes my way. I am naturally no hermit, but might possibly sit out in the sturdiest frequenter of a bar room, if my business called me hither. I had 3 chairs in my house, one for solitude, one for friendship, and 3 for society. When visitors came in large and unexpected numbers, there was but the 3rd chair for them all. But they generally economized the room by standing up. It is surprising how many great men and women a small house will contain. I've had 25 or 30 souls with their bodies at once under my roof, and that we often parted without being aware that we had come very near to each other. One inconvenience I sometimes experienced in so small a house, the difficulty of getting to a sufficient distance from my guests, so when we began to utter big thoughts in big words. You want room for your thoughts to get into sailing trim and run a course or 2 before they make their port. The bullet of your thought must have overcome its lateral and ricochet motion and fallen into its last and steady course before it reaches the ear of the bearer, who else it may plow again through the other side of his head. Also, our sentences wanted room to unfold and form their columns in the interval. Individuals, like nations, must have suitable, broad, and natural boundaries, even a considerable neutral ground between them. So, as I said, he wasn't cut off from society. He saw people. He interacted with people. He actually traveled a little bit while he was in the woods. And he held jobs, though not steady employment, but he held jobs. Now, after about 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days exactly, he decided to go back to Concord, go back to society. And why, he said, is that I left the woods for good a reason as I went there. Perhaps it seemed to me that I had several more lives to live and could not spare any more time for that one. It is remarkable how easily and immeasurably we fall into a particular route and make a beaten track for ourselves. The surface of the earth is soft and impressible by the feet of men, with the paths of which they have traveled. How worn and dusty, then, must be the highways of the world, how deep the ruts of tradition and conformity. I did not wish to take a cabin passage, but rather to go before the mast and on the deck of the world, for there I could see the moonlight amid the mountains. I do not wish to go below now. I learned this, at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. He will put some things behind, will pass an invisible boundary, new, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within him. Or the old laws be expanded and interpreted in his favor in a more liberal sense. And he will live life with the license of a higher order of beings. In proportion as he simplifies his life, the laws of the universe will appear less complex, and solitude will not be solitude, nor poverty, nor weakness. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. Mr. Toastmaster.